Welcome to ESVN, the Emma Sports Vigilant Network show. My name is Emma Vigilant, and you know what to do, folks. Subscribe, youtube.com/ESVN show. Put on push notifications so you know when we're going live, like we are right now, 4 p.m. Eastern on the dot, to recap NFL Week 3, at least all of the games except 2, because we have a Monday night doubleheader tonight. Now, rate us 5 stars, Apple, Spotify, all that good stuff, and say hello to Bradley Alsop.
Hello, everyone.
Both of our teams won this weekend. Woo! Although I guess it wasn't the weekend for you. You want to start off with the Jets? Let's quickly get right into that, because I was texting you throughout that how good the ball looks coming out of Aaron Rodgers' hands. I don't know if I love that offense, but it's just a great reminder. No, I don't like this West Coast dink and dunk thing. It's the same thing he was doing with Nathaniel Hackett in Green Bay, where I thought that was holding him back, but seemingly what he's very comfortable in. He's kind of gone away with some of the gunslinger stuff, and he's like, I'm going to be Joe Montana with this West Coast thing, but he executed it phenomenally over on Thursday night.
Yeah, it's just like it's funny to see how much ingenuity and creativity comes from a number of different offensive play callers in the year 2024. And this Jets offense literally looks like a, mid-90s.
It does.
Yeah.
It really does.
49ers or Broncos package.
I don't know how far it can take them, but I will just say, again, seeing Rodgers throw the football, I've said this before, he's got some issues, but he was my favorite football player at the time when I fell in love with playing football. And it's just good to see him back out there, because there is not a quarterback in the history of the sport who throws a more catchable, more beautiful football than Aaron Rodgers, with those long fingers that look like he's literally a space alien because he can manipulate the ball in that way. He's just, he's one of the greatest talents in the history of the sport, regardless of what you think of him.
And it is such a shocking thing for I think Jets fans to not even just the quality of play from Rodgers, because even if it was for this past game, even if it was 30% worse or something like that.
Yes.
Even still, I just think the reaction time that Rodgers possesses in the quickness with which he gets the ball out, it's like being on two different planets, basically, from the football Jets fans watched last year compared to even the first 2 or 3 games of the sample size of having an upright Aaron Rodgers,
right,
being able to throw to this group of pass catchers who obviously come with some high risk just by virtue of injuries and also just by virtue of a little bit of anonymity outside of Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, but what I appreciated the most about this game, too, is that at the very least, Rodgers, the 49ers game and a little bit of the Titans game, Rodgers basically could only really throw to, maybe only really wanted to kind of filter the passing attack through Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall.
And Alan Lazard.
But to see
Lazard,
who obviously is an entourage member for Rodgers, so obviously he's going to get fed. He already has, I think, more touchdowns than he had all of last season. I was pretty positive he was going to get cut from the team if Rodgers wasn't healthy enough to start the season. He already has 3 touchdowns. I think he literally had 3. He may have had 2. He may have had 0. Yeah. It's hard to remember. But to see him getting more involved and actually looking rather effective. But to your point, Emma, it's
Rodgers had 2 touchdowns. He was 27 or 35 for 281, and Lazard had one of them
in the Pats game.
Yeah,
and the combo of kind of Lazard getting more involved in the action, just because I think they obviously are so simpatico with one another and have that lived in history with one another, which obviously Zach Wilson did not possess. And also, frankly, Lazard is really only there because Rodgers is there, so go figure.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I always said about the team last year is just this was a team, custom made for Aaron Rodgers. So when you have somebody else in the driver's seat, it's just not workable.
Yeah.
It was meant for one guy to shepherd this, not anybody else.
And Will McDonald Will McDonald had a really good game for the Jets. The Jets defensive line showed up, even though they've had some injuries on that front. Quincy Williams also had a phenomenal game for the Jets, and the defense is just as talented as it gets. And then, I mean, the evolution of Garrett Wilson's game is something to behold, because he's clearly like a really smart, cerebral, serious player, and he's just getting better and better as the days go on. And Breece Hall is a superstar. And then when you have Braylon Allen, who can be the muscle, he's evolving into something really great as well. Like, the roster's awesome.
Yeah, I think to see. Well, I think the barometer too with what makes Wilson, I think, very impressive is, like, I always think when you have a guy who can get over, get into 1,000-yard receiving territory with bad quarterback play, basically means that the sky's the limit when he has someone even like semi-competent behind center, and that's, I think, Wilson's already showing that. And as you're saying, with a number of the plays kind of designed for Breece Hall to be part of this, kind of the fulcrum of the rushing attack. Braylon Allen being like, I think there's a real direct correlation between how like bouncy this guy's body is with how they could not express it enough, but it's really hard to believe how he's not of legal drinking age yet. Like, I think the reason by which he is so elastic and like literally he can get like hit at full speed and just he bounces off like a bowling ball is because he's just such a young player. But to see how you kind of like, intensely and violently he runs, and with great effect so far. I mean, I think this was a guy they drafted in this year's draft in the 4th or 5th round to be getting literally anything resembling some sort of like supplementary effective production out of a guy that wasn't drafted particularly highly, and who may have kind of been considered a relatively one-dimensional back. Is extremely, I think, encouraging for the Jets. Just the fact that they have weapons that exist outside of Wilson and Hall, and the fact that Mike Williams got a little bit more involved in the attack when he really wasn't a particular factor in the first 2 games. And as well, someone I always had an eye on and kind of was, enjoyed watching, but just I knew he just did not get the requisite amount of contact because Wilson was sort of fighting for his life the entire season last year. Zach Wilson, not Garrett. Is Tyler Conklin, who had a few great catches. He has really good hands and is pretty quick for his size. So to have kind of like a reliable tight end option there too for like throws over the middle or stuff even potentially schemed up for him. There's just more potentiality than I even thought in week 1 after seeing this game. We'll obviously see how it extends to Denver, who had just had a very, very good defensive performance against Tampa this past weekend. But this was easily the most like encouraging proof of concept game, not only of like the Aaron Rodgers experience. Obviously, it's 3 games, I guess if you include the 4 snaps but probably also the most encouraging offensive performance of maybe, I don't know, 10 seasons of Jets football, potentially.
Yeah. That's how Jets fans seem to be reacting. We should say that the Pats are who we thought they were. Jacoby Brissett was under siege the entire time. I'm surprised he survived the game, although at the end of the game, did get a bit of a glimpse of Drake May, who still looks raw. But yeah, that Thursday night game was a bit of a beatdown. Now on to the more recent turn of events. Let's just talk about the Vikings for a sec. We're getting right into it here. Brian Flores and Kevin O'Connell are just operating at a level where I just don't even. They are the best coordinator duo in the game right now, arguably. I mean, they're outworking the San Francisco 49ers, who are 1-2 inexplicably after completely choking that game yesterday. But gosh, did the Minnesota Vikings look phenomenal. Wow, was I right about my prediction that Sam Darnold would have a top 15 statistical quarterback year? It's going to be top 10, most likely. Wrong about things like the Steelers falling off a cliff, but we can get to that in a little bit.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think Darnold is either like first or second in touchdowns already.
I mean, he had 4 touchdowns in that game. Right. And he just like tore up that defense for the Houston Texans, which had, they have a lot of talent on that side of the ball. And they also had like a bit of a narrative. I thought, okay, Danielle Hunter's going to go in there and wreck shit up. But in fact, it was Grenard who
on
was
the other
one
end of the revenge game. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I just felt like I thought more because Danielle Hunter had more reason to be upset. I mean, he was lowballed for basically the entirety of his career while he was in Minnesota. But yeah, C.J. Stroud, it started off poorly. He had a tipped pass that ended up being an interception. The Vikings went up 7-0, and you're like, okay, this is going to be a shootout. And no, it just wasn't. Sam Darnold and the Vikings drove down the field with ease, and Houston just couldn't get anything going. They couldn't even get Nico Collins going, anything like that. And it just shows that Flores back-to-back with the victory over the Niners and now the victory over the Texans has a beat on this Shanahan tree offense, which is a massive boon to them. I mean, they have the tiebreak now for the playoffs with the 49ers. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
The Vikings are going places. If Darnold can stay healthy and there was a scare in that game.
Yeah, that was obviously.
Which I'm hoping was just a cramp.
Nerve-wracking. Yeah. To see, Nick Mullins come out for any reason is obviously cause for concern. Mm-hmm. But, no, and as you said, fortunately, he came back in. It seemed to be a minor wrinkle as opposed to something really, really heavily concerning. But the thing that I find the two things that I find pretty impressive about the Vikings offense so far is that O'Connell is not only, I think, making it easy for Darnold to kind of give him, kind of scheme and design guys to be pretty wide open, even against, I would say, in terms of personnel, good defenses like the Niners and like the Texans. But what I also think is interesting is that he's doing a great job, I also feel like, of layering the offense so that to kind of put enough disguising so that actually, which is something you wouldn't necessarily anticipate, is scheming it so that Justin Jefferson, who obviously you would think would just need to be kind of blanketed and sort of like surrounded by defensive backs in coverage. But there are a few plays where he kind of used either O'Connell kind of had the tight ends split out sort of and layered parallel to one another, crossing from one side of the field to the other, because that sort of like tricked or at least kind of made it so that the spine players had to go fetch them. Jefferson was just wide open behind them. Like all of the Texans picked up on the tight ends going to place, whereas JJ was just behind them, wide open on the boundary, on the sideline.
He had one touchdown, yeah. I mean, he ended up having another cool second half, which I think he's pretty banged up, Justin Jefferson, which is something to monitor. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't really. They were able really to get the run game going. That's
the other thing too is how. Compared to how lifeless it was last year to what it is now already is like this, that raises their floor so significantly.
Yeah, and it looks like, I mean, honestly, with Cam Akers is a player that he's gone through hell, but he doesn't look like the same guy, and they really missed Joe Mixon yesterday.
For the
Texans,
for sure, 100%. Yeah.
And yeah, so it was just like it almost just the avalanche started, and the Texans were unable to get back in it because Brian Flores just kept dialing stuff up. I mean, this is why I'm just like a huge Brian Flores fan. It informed how I felt about that Tua story. I think he's just like a tough, smart defensive mind who did not deserve to lose his head coaching gig. And there was a meddling owner that wanted to pay him off, allegedly, to lose games down in Miami. So, like, try to work and be, like, a really thoughtful, kind guy in that environment when Tua's your quarterback and you're falling apart in that instance. But
Brian, thanks for attending this meeting. Step onto my yacht.
Exactly.
Sir, why is Tom Brady here?
Yeah. So Flores is just on a heater right now, as is Kevin O'Connell, proving he needs a raise, and Flores needs to be in consideration for another head coaching gig.
And Flores, honestly, we've seen this in a kind of a number of places he's gone. Like we saw this in Miami. I'll never forget. It may have been 2021 or 2020. Whenever Flores was still head coach over in Miami, kind of like one of the first guys who was like, oh, like this guy knows how to, as you're alluding to, like this guy knows how to lock down like what the Rams want to do on offense to a point where it's like, it's not just like, oh, they were held to like 15 points. It's like, it's completely stifled. Like they didn't have answers for it because he was thinking about, I think, the counterpunch to this new wave of offense almost like either simultaneously with other people trying to figure it out, or he had a beat on it slightly ahead of schedule. And it's so clear seeing how he reacts to a Kyle Shanahan offense, regardless of the lack of personnel, just the base scheme of what Shanahan's throwing out there, and then an antecedent, and then a descendant of the Shanahan offense in Bobby Slowick in Houston, where there are obviously wrinkles that are kind of Slowick's alone, but Flores also knows that if they can add wrinkles to their attack, I can add wrinkles to mine.
Yeah, I'd be curious to go back and look at if they even really did too much differently, the Houston Texans, than, gosh, there's my camera going again, than what they had previously planned, because clearly Flores was able to just use some of the rules that he had used in the previous week for that carryover. So the Vikings are legit. I just think they're really going to be a real threat. I think that in the NFC, there's not a ton of standout teams at this moment except for the Minnesota Vikings. And they just look, I mean, and the Philadelphia Eagles, who have some scheme issues, and I also think Jalen Hurts is a problem. We can get into that in a little bit. But I think in terms of a complete team, I feel right now the most confident in the Minnesota Vikings.
And I think the other interesting thing too is, like, it was clear that Flores was what also I think makes Flores such an incredible DC, and I think obviously I agree. I think he should definitely have some head coaching consideration, obviously depending on how the rest of the season goes. But I think we saw the foundation of this last season when, like, literally there were not actually any players who were actually, like, talented enough to really faithfully carry out Flores' system, and they tried. Like, it was earnestly like a valiant effort from the defensive personnel in the Vikings last year. They've upgraded so much since then. Like,
yeah,
even just having Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, Van Ginkel who's crucial because he's kind of exactly what Flores wants in his system, of a guy who's sort of like, because of how versatile he is, wherever he's lining up, you just kind of can't fully tell where he's going to end up once the ball is snapped. Either he can kind of like monitor traffic in the middle of the field, or drop back in coverage after sort of simulating that he's about to rush the quarterback, or he's sort of lined up near the flat or slot receiver and just like rifling into the backfield, which got CJ Stroud a time or two in the game. As well as, having Dallas Turner now at their disposal. It's really cool to see what we were seeing last year, just with guys who actually are just like a little bit higher ceiling and also higher floor, to actually like carry it out more convincingly than they could last year.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of the Eagles as the other team, I mean, at least on paper, that I think is the most complete. They're arguably the most talented team in football, but they have issues, I think, at quarterback. We're seeing a lot of what my concerns about Jalen Hurts were, and why I never really thought he was a top 5 player, bearing itself out. But without a broken play, essentially, where the coverage got confused and Dallas Goedert was able to take it for over 60 yards to put them in the territory for Saquon Barkley to put away the Saints, this was just like a dogfight. It was an entertaining, low-scoring game, despite the fact that there wasn't a lot going on, even if, you're the fantasy manager of a guy like Alvin Kamara and you're tearing your hair out like my fiance and I were over the yesterday. But an interesting game. I think Derek Carr showed that he's Derek Carr in this game. I don't know how much the scheme. It remains to be seen if Clint Kubiak can adjust and keep this up with Derek Carr's limitations. However, they're extremely talented. Obviously, the Saints are. I mean, with Olave and Rashid Shaheed didn't have any caught passes in this game. I think that's a huge part of it, because the offense is seemingly kind of running through him and his speed and his ability to stretch things out. But I mean, Olave does that as well, but particularly Shaheed. Great undrafted story, by the way. But with that not happening, right, they weren't able to get any of the underneath stuff going, and I think that's what the Eagles exposed.
I think also in that vein, what was interesting was that the Eagles sort of kind of dispatched or sort of neutralized one element of the kind of newfangled Clint Kubiak scheme of, like, if they were sort of combating the heavy personnel and sort of like loading the box to kind of stop the run, and really only Carr could rely on the other sort of, central element of his type of offense, which is play action. If that's all they could go to, they needed something else to kind of offer a change of pace or offer something somewhat different than what the Eagles were anticipating. And they didn't seem as if they were sort of able to kind of develop that counter on the fly. I obviously imagine, I wonder if, now watching film being like, okay, these guys were able to sort of neutralize us. What can we do differently? That'll kind of show, I think, the mettle of Clint Kubiak is like, can he make those adjustments now that he knows that he sort of needs to? But I also do think it's a testament. I mean, I actually thought the Eagles defense played pretty
Fangio bounced back.
Yeah, like I thought, Jalen Carter had a number of really good plays, just constantly getting pressure and getting kind of closing the pocket a little bit to make Carr slightly more uncomfortable, which, as we've talked about, Carr can, and even guys in the league acknowledge this openly. Carr does struggle Carr struggles when he is pressured. It doesn't sort of bring out. He's not one of those guys that when he gets blitzed, it like brings out the better qualities. Mm-hmm. Like he's sort of like he needs to remain upright with a strong pocket, and Jalen Carter and guys like Milton Williams in the middle of the defensive front weren't really letting that happen. And then in the spine of the defense, Reed Blankenship had a great game. I mean, he ultimately kind of sealed the game with that last interception, and so I thought it was a good bounce back, especially after sort of how shaky the defense had looked the first 2 weeks. And then, as much as I totally agree with you with when it comes to Hurts, in the sense that I think when you watch a little closely with Hurts, you sort of see that a few things that you wish he maybe was processing or acting upon like 5 seconds earlier happens pretty frequently. As like, I feel like he does the right quarterback things, but he's not doing them fast enough.
He doesn't have a power arm, so he can't throw things. Everything has to be based on timing. And he's like the rich man's version of again, we're talking about Tua, but he can also run, in the sense of like a lot of it is touch, a lot of it is timing. I don't trust that in a lot of big game situations. The thing about the Eagles, though, is they're one of the most talented teams I've ever seen in my life. So it's about, can the scheme match up with that? So far, I'm a little bit concerned about it all coming together, but I just feel like with that kind of talent, they're always going to be at the top of the NFC. It's just as like, can Jalen Hurts not throw bad picks out like he did at the end
in
of
the
that.
Red zone too? Like that's been the problem too, is that they've been like red zone turnovers.
And we didn't talk about it with the Falcons game. They had a lot of time. They had a good amount of time to drive down the field and get into field goal range when they were down by one. And he threw some dumb pick because it was a sailing pass. He doesn't have a power throw in the same way. It's a lot of arcs. You can see that. Like, in the way that Justin Herbert sometimes needs a little bit, it's the opposite, where he could just throw a dart straight line, and sometimes it gets batted down because it hits the top of an offensive lineman. Jalen Hurts is often lofting these passes because he's anticipating his receivers, and if that's disrupted in any way, he throws picks. And the problem is that the Saints, I mean, the Eagles actually got pretty banged up in this game. Like Lane Johnson went out, and Devontae Smith had a pretty brutal looking play where he's as tough as nails despite his size.
He really is.
But his helmet flew off and he has a concussion. And so, look, I think the Eagles are winning the NFC East. We'll get into the Cowboys and the Giants in a little bit. But if they could just put it together, I think that the Eagles are obviously one of the best teams in the league.
I think what's interesting with you saying about the timing and touch is that I think the reason why it's a little bit more frustrating in the sense that I think if you kind of level it out a little bit, like the peak of that type of quarterback, although obviously I think maybe the arm talent is a little bit better, but the peak of that to me is like Dak Prescott, in the sense of like,
yeah.
But I think the difference between Hurts and Dak Prescott is like, Hurts has it, but sometimes I think when he gets even slightly complicated, he starts to become late on responses, whereas I think Dak very rarely, even if it's maybe he's too conservative, he does really trigger very quickly.
Well, Dak is a pro-style quarterback, which is not what Jalen Hurts is. Jalen Hurts is going to operate a system in a way that's extremely high level, but if the system is not there, then he's not somebody who can just drop back and dice you up, where I believe that Dak Prescott can do that. If I were to put Dak Prescott in the Eagles, I think that they would have won the Super Bowl. Yes. Yeah, even though Jalen Hurts played phenomenally in that game, I get it. But it was much more, in my view, Shane Steichen than it was Jalen Hurts.
Because I think we've seen a little bit of some struggles. We obviously saw them with Brian Johnson last year, but I think there's still a little bit missing from the passing attack. Although I will say, so that is, as you're saying, because of the quality of the talent on the roster. It's also very much neutralized when the run game is still looking this great, because Saquon had a few really nice runs, and
he's showing off. I mean, as he should. He looks phenomenal, and like that offensive line, they know how to do. He broke off those runs that ice the game, and I mean, it just he looks like his old self. He looks more decisive, and it's easier to be more decisive when you know that someone's going to block for you.
It's sort of also kind of, this is probably the ideal or close to the ideal of what you would want to see of the idea of Saquon Barkley on the Eagles.
Right.
As in, like, there was no guarantee that this would immediately work, especially with Jason Kelce not coming back. But so far, the system and Jeff Stoutland being not only the architect of the blocking, but the architect of the actual play design for the run game, is still standing firm as like being effective. So, yeah. Well, obviously, we'll see how this continues. But I think the only thing to really kind of keep an eye on is can Hurts find a way to be a little bit more effective? And also, I guess it doesn't help that AJ Brown and Devontae Smith might be out. But we get more to see if they can have some sort of second element as outside of prioritizing and mostly leaning on Saquon, as opposed to kind of having it be a more balanced offensive attack.
Absolutely. The other, I mean, for me, this was a shocking game because I thought the Bucs were going to win and beat the Broncos. The Bucs were 2-0, and they were at home, and there was no indication that the Broncos were going to be able to fix this situation. Like, Bo Nix kept throwing behind the line of scrimmage, and it wasn't going anywhere. But man, they took the Buccaneers to task, and they won 26-7. The only touchdown that the Bucs had was to Chris Godwin. But I'm happy for Bo Nix because he was kind of like, looking like things were not going super well for him. And he was able to come back and turn things around. They went up 17-0 pretty quickly. There was a little bit of an issue. Javonte Williams then lost a fumble after they had gone up 17-0. And then that's when that Godwin touchdown happened. But other than that, I mean, Bo Nix was showing off specifically his athleticism. It's like he stopped just trying to fully run the system and he just played football, and that helped him out a lot.
And I think, and also the rushing attack, the combination of as you were saying, Williams and McLaughlin outside of the Williams fumble, but also Nick sort of calling his own number and taking it for a few scrambles was showed you also what may have been missing a little bit from the first two games, which is that when he needs to be and when he can, he is a genuinely dynamic scrambler.
Yeah,
like he's a
good athlete.
He can actually, if need be, if the pocket like fully collapses and he needs to get out of something, he actually can do it. It's not like an every now and again thing. Like, he actually has that speed. He has a little bit of like twitchiness when he's doing so. So that was, I think, definitely for the Broncos good to see from him that, like, as you were saying, it didn't seem like he was nearly as much just kind of in his head thinking about what's going to come next. He was kind of getting into more of like a flow state of like playing in this offense, playing in an NFL game.
And I should have been conscious of how the coaching situation will work the other way around, with Todd Bowles having some familiarity with the Sean Payton offense from their time in the NFC South together. So I thought, I'm sorry, Sean Payton the other way. I thought that Todd Bowles might have a beat on the rookie quarterback because of Sean Payton's offense, but it was the other way around. So, like, them not starting off 0-3 is really, really a great way for them to escape. We could talk about the other teams that escaped that, but right now we have one that's definitely 0-3. That's the Tennessee Titans, and then two potentials, the Bengals and Jags, and the Jags, which is like, whoa! I thought the Jags. I mean, the Bengals seem to always start slow, but the Jags, I still thought would be better at this point this year. Speaking of the Titans, The Packers won. Malik Willis revenge game. He was playing like a man possessed, and this just goes to show what coaching does.
No, this is like, I am so unbelievably impressed.
I'm so happy for him.
And yeah, it's also a great story because it's like, look at what can happen when a guy is actually. And again, this isn't as if he had the entire offseason. He got signed like 3 weeks ago by the Packers.
Matt LaFleur is that dude. He really is, and he's just so understated that people don't think about him in that way. But oh my God, how has he been able to coach up Malik Willis, who we have talked about as like having a lot of potential, but very raw.
And who I basically
more raw than a lot of, like, when we talk about raw quarterback prospects, raw.
And who I basically, like, for a number of times, especially even prior to the even in one of these weeks in our pick segments. Both this season, the early days of this season, and last season, the year before, I had like completely written this guy off. Right. I was like, I don't know if he can. I don't think he can play in a pro game anymore.
But given how Will Levis looks, and then he comes into that building 100%. And just like takes them to task.
Absolutely,
put up 30 points now. Like Willis, he cooled off a little bit later, but he was efficient. They converted third and longs like multiple times, in part with his scrambling, but he also threw the ball okay. And
he had a few throws where I was like, oh, they're schemed up for him, but they were pretty long. They were pretty intermediate to long throws, and he trusted himself enough to go kind of to do a little bit more big game hunting that I would have literally ever anticipated him doing any time before this exact game.
And for Matt LaFleur to, like, Jordan Love and Malik Willis do not play similarly.
No, that too, exactly. They're not one-to-one.
Jordan Love, a less creative, a less, like, intelligent coach would have picked up like a Tim Boyle, like we saw, who came in for Skylar Thompson, or somebody who's a more pro-style quarterback, like a Nick Mullins, or, you could just plug him in. You don't have to change your game plan. It doesn't matter. Jordan Love can be a little bit of an athlete, but you know what I'm trying to say. He's more of like he's a pro-style quarterback. The fact that Matt LaFleur took a risk and was like, I'm going to get this guy and work with him, and I'm going to come up with a game plan that's specific to him, it just shows he just is one of the best coaches in the league. And I was happy to see Jair Alexander get a pick. He's a total psycho in a good way. I love his game. I've loved him since he came out of college, so I kind of root for him low-key. But yeah, the Titans have issues, and Will Levis, despite dating one of the hottest women to ever come out of Bachelor Nation, Victoria F. I mean, if you guys watch reality TV, Victoria F is like a legend in terms of how hot she is.
She's dating Will Levis?
Yes, she is.
No way.
She is.
Oh, I thought she was dating. I think
Greg,
and then she also, I think, dated Chris Soules for a time. She's kind of, no, with all due, hey, listen, no judgment, but she's had a few notable beaux.
Well, they like to note it because that's how hot she is, right? She's ridiculous, and so good for Will Levis, but it's distracting him. Okay.
I think what's interesting too, and when you're contrasting, especially, I feel like this contrast is also much more marked when you're literally seeing the guy that the Titans got rid of after drafting him having some sort of experience and some sort of success or improvement in a different coaching, in a different environment. That Levis doesn't really seem to have learned anything from his like prior pro experience last year yet. Like he's so reckless that it's almost surprising how little regard he has for not only his body but the football that is supposedly he is tasked with possessing.
He's an athlete. I don't know if he's a quarterback. In the same way we said that about Malik Willis, actually. It's like, he's a phenomenal athlete. Is he a quarterback? Will Levis is strong as hell. He's like, eating bananas with the peel on. He's doing like all the stuff in the gym that he needs to do to like get right, but he's just not the kind. Like, I say this honestly because he's more like jacked than most quarterbacks I've seen. Like, it's almost like maybe just work on more elasticity, like TB12 or something like that.
Well, that's the other interesting thing too. Is like, it's one of those things that we were sort of talking about with Joe Milton, the Tennessee quarterback coming out of college, who became a backup for the Patriots, or a third stringer or something rather. Is like, he can very clearly throw like he can rocket the ball.
Right.
The question is, like, does he know where it's going? And is he thinking about it enough to know where it's going reliably?
Does he have the mental acuity to play quarterback? Does he have the elasticity in his arm to make different kinds of
and that's
throws?
right, like other throws that aren't just like
Power.
uncork it. Yeah.
And when he needs to make that kind of throw, he can. But I just don't know. Like, he just, in short, he seems like a dumbass.
And the thing is, what leads to that, to what also comes downstream of him being a little bit of a dumbass, is like, I said that. I think I said this last week or the week before. I don't think I wasn't super familiar, but it kind of makes sense, obviously, because he's the son of a coach. But Brian Callahan very clearly has absolutely no patience for Will Levis's shit, and it's only getting that sliver of patience that he's had is growing ever slimmer, and so I'm not sure how he's going to like punish this guy, but I think that might be coming soon.
Well, he came out and supported him in the press, which who knows what goes on behind the scenes, right? That's the right thing to do regardless. But Mason Rudolph is the backup.
That's the thing. Like, would you even want to? Like, why? What's the point of that, right? But
did they bring back Tannehill?
Yeah, right, or something, or maybe something even more drastic.
I mean, Tannehill should go back to Miami. Maybe he doesn't want to deal with Stephen Ross again, but he is like he could. They're getting Tyler Huntley ready. I get it. I mean, I don't know what else there is to say about that game. I mean, the Miami game. That was really hard to watch.
Unfortunately, we've seen this, and the thing is, I feel for, like, it's not as if I don't think anything like malicious about Skylar Thompson. I've seen him. I saw him I went to this Jets Dolphins game last year, the year before, where the Jets like put up 40 on the Dolphins because Tua got injured early, and the Dolphins were only able to put up 13 points. We saw it in the 2 years ago playoff game when Tua was out against the Bills. He's an extremely, extremely low ceiling option.
He looks like a practice squad wide receiver. Why is he the backup quarterback? It makes to one of the most injury-prone quarterbacks in the NFL.
And that's the thing, is that it's just like once Tua goes out, I think potentially this actually is the fault of the people behind the roster construction, knowing how injury-prone, and especially not just I'm saying, he might fall and tear something or break something. I mean, specifically like the concussion element. He has a specific problem.
Well, you know why? This is what I'm saying. This is sometimes the politics of the sport.
Right.
You can't have a guy behind Tua that's throwing the ball harder than Tua. You can't do it, so you've got to gas him up. Put little Skylar Thompson up there. Tim Boyle looked better than Skylar Thompson when he came in the game.
Which is crazy because he's, I think, one of, if not the worst quarterback in the league.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not even joking. I think that's part of why they constructed their roster in that way, to not threaten Tua.
Right.
They do that all the time. With a lot of quarterbacks.
It just seems like such malpractice, especially with Tua, because of what he's experiencing, to not be like, okay, why don't we have, even if they had someone like Tyrod Taylor, who the Jets have, who I think was a significant step up from Tim Boyle. Yeah. He's a little older, but he knows how to manage an offense.
Yeah.
And especially with high level talent, I mean, there were multiple throws Thompson had yesterday where Tyreek or Waddle were wide open, and he's dirting the ball. He's throwing it 10 feet left of them. He's throwing it into the stands almost. Like, it's just a shame, because even with the injuries, I just think you'd want someone baseline to give the high octane talent you have. Give Devon Achane, give Jalen Waddle, give Tyreek Hill, give them a shot. Give them a chance to catch the ball.
But it's that, and I mean, they're cooked, the Dolphins, in my opinion. Like, I think that I think I had them missing the playoffs this year regardless. They lost way too many guys. They don't have toughness on their team. They have shown now in a few separate instances that Mike McDaniel needs to adjust a little more. And I know that there's issues maybe with the personnel at quarterback and with the offensive line, but like, it's how many times in a row that Sean McDermott knows exactly what the hell you're going to do and stopped you. Tua was healthy when they were getting the beatdown on Thursday Night Football. Now they have a long week to prepare, and Mike McDonald versus Mike McDaniel gives him,
which is not great news given how the Seahawks have been playing so far.
I mean, the Seahawks are 3-0. It's the only undefeated teams in the NFL right now are the Chiefs. Makes sense. The Seahawks, which, like, gotta say, Geno Smith, I kind of made fun of you for saying he was playing like a top 10 quarterback, but I gotta eat my words. Statistically, you're right, and he does look good.
He's also, because
DK's having a good year too.
He's been playing really well, and I actually think Brian Grubb, I think it's Ryan Grubb or Brian Grubb, the new OC. I think he came over from the University of Washington.
Whoever the head coach from Washington, the University of Washington was. I'm forgetting. Yeah.
And I think he's just already, which I think goes to show you what we were talking about last week. We're seeing a difference kind of in the successes of, unfortunately, they're crossed a little bit, the Seattle offense and the Chicago offense, because I'm actually liking what I'm seeing more schematically from the Seahawks offense this season already so far. And I think that even though the Bears-Colts game was a little tough to watch, there were moments where I saw Caleb Williams trying against really all opposition. And I mean all opposition, meaning what was schemed up for him and what was schemed up against him by the Colts to showcase his talent. I don't think Caleb Williams right now is the problem. I think Shane Waldron's the problem.
Exactly. Shane, I mean, we can get into that in a second, but like that's right. I mean, they are the passing game is more creative. The offensive line, as you were saying, is better. And
even they're even if it's not like they're a little bit healthier, but like as we were saying last week with the Bears offensive line, it's like you need a guy who isn't going to be like, oh, well, our offensive line is injured or not doing that great. I guess we're just going to suck all year. Like, it's part of the OC's job to make it to mitigate those concerns. Grubb, I think, is doing that, and also I think obviously they're a little bit healthier, but that line is looking significantly better than it did last year. And just generally, McDonald is, I think, just also instilling already a pretty severe energy shift in this team. The defense for the last few years of the Pete Carroll tenure was rather passive. They couldn't really get home
outdated.
They couldn't get home to the quarterback, and it's not as if they didn't have pieces who could potentially do it. The rushing attack, both for the run and pass game, just didn't really. There wasn't much to offer, but they have guys out there. Like Boye Mafe is a solid player. I think when he's actually kind of put in place in the right direction, he's good, and on a per snap basis, he was effective. I just think McDonald and Grubb is giving this team, who had the molding prop correct, to actually sort of elevate a little bit, where I almost think, unfortunately, Eberflus and Waldron are doing the opposite.
Yeah.
I think they're operating almost against the talent that they have.
And what's crazy is, first of all, the Geno Smith threw 2 interceptions, and they still only scored 3 points, the Dolphins, with all of those guys on offense. And the Seahawks have lost their starting running back, and they have been playing with Zach Charbonnet, and they haven't missed a beat.
And who has been both we already knew he was a good blocker, so even for that, he's a good component to have on offense. But credit to him, he had a few tough runs, breaking a number of tackles, and they also schemed him up to get kind of a few times get like a pretty sizable chunk play. That's not really Charbonnet's game.
Yeah.
And so to even be able to, even as you're saying, Emma, and as we've been talking about, like, roll with the punches of even if Geno throws a pick, trust in the defense to get us back, to get the other team into third and long, potentially get into punting situation, which they did. No, they didn't. It's not as if the other team scored anything, as you're saying, to really capitalize on the Geno picks. And you're missing your kind of integral running back in Kenneth Walker. How do we get Charbonnet out there to do what we need him to do to keep this offense rolling? They're doing that and then some.
Yeah.
It's just showing. I just think it's just showing a failure of creativity and imagination in Chicago, and where that imagination and ingenuity is really thriving so far is in Seattle.
And we'll also get to this Cowboys, but Jonathan Hankins is like in his mid-30s and is having he had a horrible year last year for the Cowboys because they couldn't stop the run, and now he's like one of the best plug and play players for them on defense over in Seattle.
Hankins was like the only kind of like option on the run in the run stuffing for Dallas last year. Then when he started to have some sort of bad injury luck and complications and things, he wasn't playing nearly as consistently. We've beat it to death at this point, but like, there then became a need to have reliance on a guy like Mozzie Smith, their first round pick, to kind of sub in for Hankins.
Yep.
To pretty disastrous results. And as you're saying, Hankins leaves Dallas for Seattle, and Mike,
he looks good.
He gets the Mike McDonald treatment, and he's already looking more effective than he did last year.
And Rayshon Jenkins, that safety that they have up there in Seattle, was also playing phenomenally in that game. So the defense, they have that right, and I have high hopes long term for Devon Witherspoon too.
Oh, he had also some really nice plays.
He's just like, his hair's on fire.
Yeah, I love to watch a guy like that play, because he sort of possesses, I think, the upper echelon cornerback skill component, which is being insane, and he definitely has that in spades.
And we talked about the Bears without talking about the Bears, but yeah, I mean, the Bears, like, with what Anthony Richardson was giving them, he had some moments, but like the beginning of the game was this end zone pick, and he seems to have issues.
Oh my God, yeah, that was bad.
Red zone, yeah. And so it's like, okay, then the Bears went up by a field goal, and they just can't do shit on offense. This is, in the modern NFL, it's insane. So, I mean, we know what the problem is. It's Shane Waldron. I saw people unearthing, like...
That Jackson Smith and Jigba video.
No.
Sorry. I thought that's maybe...
I hadn't seen that.
There was this video of JSN at the draft or the combine or something, or even it might have even been the Super Bowl. It was some sort of media day event, and a reporter was like, you're losing Shane Waldron as your offensive coordinator. He's going over to the Bears. Do you have any like thoughts or any kind of anything you want to share with the Bears about who they're kind of getting? And he literally said something. He was silent for a second and literally said something like, "Good luck."
Oh my God!
And they started laughing, and the reporter was like, the reporter almost seemed like a little embarrassed, because he was like, I thought I was gonna get some kind of boilerplate like,
that's amazing.
Yeah, boilerplate like, he's a great guy, like, wish him all the best.
Well, we hated the hire at the time. It's worse than we thought. There's no reason the interior of the offensive line. There's no reason the line should be playing this poorly. They've invested top picks in this line. It just should be serviceable. They're screwing over Caleb Williams, who can't get anything going. And like, they have the pieces. Caleb is not like, I see all that stupid aggregator blogger Dove Kleiman, who rides Brady, who sucks up to Brady all the time. That's his entire career.
I see where you're going.
Yeah. He's like making fun of Caleb Williams. Just shut up. Like, what is wrong with people? Okay, do you watch the games? I guess that guy does, but he's just like somebody who wants to get attention on Twitter. But like, do you watch the games? He's under siege every single time, and there's no creativity in the way the offense is called.
And where the creativity is coming from is in the few moments where Caleb Williams can kind of create enough space to do literally anything. I mean, he had a few throws. There was, I think, one to Adunze over on the left sideline, and then one over the middle to DJ Moore, where it's like he's breaking contain, flushing out of the pocket, moving to his right, flipping his hips, and then uncorking a great throw on the move. Like, it's incredible that he can do that. He shouldn't have to do it all the time to get literally one thing going on the offense.
It's so unsustainable and wrong to do this to him, and hopefully they improve in some regard. I feel like they need to. I thought that last week was their low point, but this was kind of their low point because the game was there to be had. And Jonathan Taylor just put it away for the Indianapolis
He had a great
Colts.
game. I mean, there was that one pile push towards the end was so awesome that the refs let it happen, where like the entire Colts offensive line just pushed him into the end zone. It was so awesome.
And I don't know what they're doing with DJ Moore. Like, DJ Moore had this that insane like Hail Mary situation where they didn't end up scoring because they were at the goal line, but they're just not featuring him. He's just had the worst of like the offensive coordinator situation his entire time in the league. So I feel for him, but yeah, there's not too much for me to say about that game. I don't know. I don't think either of these teams are playoff teams, to be honest with you. So,
but I think the most concerning thing to me about this Bears performance, outside of obviously just the structural issues we're seeing, is that another knock against Shane Waldron is that they were making this Colts defense who has a pretty bad run unit, by the way.
Yeah.
But they were making them look like pretty successful all day. Like, these were guys who I was like, oh, like,
they can't run the ball. DeAndre Swift looks, well, I can't tell if it's him or if it's the line.
But
he's been averaging like less than 2 yards a carry the whole year.
Totally. It's like it's with Swift as kind of the central back, even with a little bit of Roshan Johnson supplementing in. It's been anemic. And even this Colts run defense, who was getting lit up the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, they were able to capitalize on how kind of poorly operating and how kind of like minimally effective this Bears run game is. Of all teams, I was not expecting the Colts, who have been basically teams have run all over them to do this, to basically be able to, like, you know, you've seen Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner and these guys on the line, Nick Cross like throttling in to stop a run. You see these guys, like, they're in their bag, they're kind of vibing, and it's like this team is vibing. This Colts run defense unit is vibing. They were getting destroyed the last 2 weeks.
You mentioned Roshan Johnson. They should be playing him more. If DeAndre Swift needs a hole, that's why he was successful last year in Philadelphia. If there's no holes, put the bruiser in. Put Roshan Johnson in.
Who's tough, can go through the tackles, yeah.
I mean, that's the role that he played behind Bijan Robinson at Texas. So just do it.
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
do that.
100%.
Right, and then things will open up. But, of course, I'm mad for Caleb. I'm mad for Bears fans.
It's frustrating for the Bears organization and for the Bears fans, and honestly for people who, like me, who don't have like an actual personal investment. I still wanted to see these components function together.
Yeah, me too.
And it's just so far, it kind of seems to me that, I don't mean to be so cynical when I say this, but it sort of seems to me like we may have to wait until the season's over, Eberflus and Waldron get fired, and Ben Johnson comes in and is paid as much as like the entire city budget of Chicago to coach the Bears.
I'm not there yet, 3 weeks in, but we'll see. I do think that they need to get rid of Waldron at some point, but maybe they could still have success and be a dark horse playoff contender. I mean, that defense is real.
The defense is still really solid.
Yeah.
I have no complaints on that side of the ball.
Speaking of solid defenses, the best defense in the NFL right now is the Pittsburgh Steelers. That has carried them to 3-0. And Justin Fields, like, will Russell Wilson see the field regardless, or if there, God willing, no injury to Justin Fields? The answer is no, because if Justin Fields keeps playing like this, he's been improving. Perhaps I saw, we have some Bears fans in the audience who thought I was overstating Justin Fields' improvement last year with the Bears. And I don't know. I guess I just respect his toughness as a player and the fact that he's so resilient and he has these amazing tools. I don't see him as a Will Levis type who's unable to really internalize the coaching that he's getting. But they both have strong, he's got a strong arm, and if he's just running in a straight line, he's the best running quarterback in football. Like, Lamar is the best running quarterback of all time, but that's his evasiveness now at this point in his career. Justin Fields is freaking fast as anybody, and if you give him an inch, he'll take a mile. No, not really, but you know what I'm saying. Like, the Chargers, look, it's hard to glean in the same way that I meant to say this point about the Seahawks. Like, I don't know how good the Seahawks actually are. They've beaten the Patriots in overtime. They beat Bo Nix in his first start, I think, in Seattle, and then they beat Skylar Thompson-led Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, right. It's been an easy schedule so far.
Same with the Steelers.
Right.
I mean, the Steelers have had a very easy schedule. They had first game off the Achilles. Although, look, I don't think the Falcons are that good. I think Kirk showed things last night, but not good things about the state of his game at his age. But yeah, I mean, so the Steelers played the Falcons. Then who did they play last week? I'm totally blanking. They had another almost baseball score affair. It's like
so it's been Falcons, Broncos, Chargers.
Right. So
it was 13-6 Steelers against Denver, and then
two of the undefeated teams had the Bo Nix experience, right. And I mean, good for him. He ended up winning that game in Tampa. But my point is just that, like, it's I don't know. I don't like the Chargers. As soon as Justin Herbert tweaked his high ankle sprain, Harbaugh said he took him out of the game just to be safe, and like, they have Taylor Heineke as the backup. The Chargers, I think, are building this year too. So without Justin Herbert, I'm not somebody who's like going to write home about Taylor Heineke, especially when he's playing against his former offensive coordinator and Arthur Smith, who's going to be able to have some tells on him that he can give to the defense. So yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh, they're phenomenally coached. They know how to stop the run, which was huge to stop the Chargers, because that's how you stop a Jim Harbaugh led offense and what they're trying to do there in LA. Steelers, good for them. They're probably going to make the playoffs, and I'll eat my words. I can't believe it, and I'm just happy for Justin Fields.
But it is a good point, because this is I think a difficult part of the schedule, because I was joking about how it made me feel like last week made me feel like I didn't really know anything about football. I think the reason why I even say that is because we use these benchmarks like 3-0, 0-3 to sort of determine certain things about these teams and trends, but like, it's simultaneously a large sample size, because it's like 3 out of 17 games. It's actually somewhat, when the small sample is the entirety of the sample, even like an even smaller subsection is still somewhat significant. But I think I have a certain level of I have a level of certainty that I feel as if, even though I might have some of these like extrapolations from this, that a few of them about these either undefeated or winless teams in the long run will potentially be like pretty almost completely wrong. And that's, I think, what's hard to fully parse. Isn't like, I see so many things with like what you're saying of like what I'm liking from this newfangled coaching staff in Seattle, how dominant the Steelers defense has been, the Chiefs kind of just being the Chiefs, and then everything that we're seeing with the Vikings. I think it's significant in a way, but there's a number of outcomes that can happen where it's like, oh, that actually didn't mean like literally anything at all.
Yeah, for sure. So we need a few more data points, I think, ourselves. Now, okay, here we go. I'm just going to talk about the Giants now. I think
Let's do it.
I saved it. Final game in the 1:00 window.
Woo!
I believe the Giants got their first win of the year. Daniel Jones saved his job. I think if they lost this game, Daniel Jones was getting benched for Drew Lock. I think it's that much of it. Like Daboll, the fans are out for blood. I feel like Daboll has never gotten the quarterback that he wanted. So that's the kind of thing that makes me, like, oh, I hope he doesn't get fired at the end of the year. I hope he doesn't get fired. But this kind of game shows they still have some fight. And a part of this is just like Deshaun Watson's just such a loser. Like, he's just so bitter out there. I hate looking at his stupid face. I loved beating Deshaun Watson yesterday with my team.
I am very much with you in that I do not like watching the Browns play.
Because he's so bitter.
The vibes are so bad.
The vibes are horrible. He's like, he scrambles ahead, and he's never like having fun. He's always getting in some guy's face like, yeah, I showed you. And then it's like, okay, dude, you lost the game. You lost the game, and you were down. You were down when you were smack talking. But it's not even joyful smack talk. It's because I can guarantee you what some of those guys are saying to him.
And some who may have less filtered than others.
Exactly. So he's
to say some really vile stuff.
He's so angry at the world, and he's continuing to play because he's got that massive contract where he needs that money because he's got to pay those settlements, which it's his own fault, both in terms of what he did, the acts that he committed, the heinous acts that he allegedly committed, and the way that he dragged out the litigation. Because he was like, I'm innocent. And then every woman kept adding to the allegation. And so he had this massive payment. So he's now like so mad at the world. This is the bed you made, buddy. And your lawyer.
Sorry, bro.
You decided to fight this like it was some sort of witch hunt. And you screwed yourself. So deal with the consequences. And deal with getting roughed up by Dexter Lawrence, one of the best defensive players in the entire NFL, opening things up for Brian Burns, who finally showed up this game. Kayvon Thibodeau, been critical of his play, but as a complimentary secondary pass rusher, as a starter, he's great. But let me give credit to Azeez Ojulari, whose brother BJ is in
Arizona.
Yeah. Great family, phenomenal players. Both of them struggle with injuries.
Yep.
Azeez Ojulari was a second-round pick for the Giants under the Dave Gettleman era, has been nothing but a consummate pro. They put him as a situational pass rusher now, and he was eating last game. eating against the Browns. They just went off on that offensive line that has some injuries. But Jedrick Wills was back. He got banged up midway through the game. But like the Giants, they let them get back in the game in the second half. But that was in part because Devin Singletary has now fumbled twice in a row. And that set up them to have a little bit more of a comeback. But like, I'm burying the lead really on offense. The story of the game was Malik Nabers, who's already setting records in terms of like being the youngest player to have 3 touchdowns as a rookie in that regard. He's already a top 7 receiver in the NFL. There's not many other guys I would take over him. Marvin Harrison looked the part in Arizona, but like as of right now, those 2 guys just look like hits, and I think I would still take Malik Nabers over Marvin Harrison.
So the 2 things that from what you've said, I think is I really really kind of match with what I was feeling watching this is that I felt similarly with Ojulari kind of out of the draft that and also honestly I feel like his rookie year there were a few times where I was like, oh, like
he was starting, but he couldn't stay on the field.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like in the
soft
moments,
tissue issues.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like in the moments that we did see him play, I'm like, oh, like this is like he was the real deal, like what I remembered him like when he was playing in college, and he was just kind of an all around. Kind of just like a comprehensively effective and useful guy. So to even see that he's out and playing well is just it's a great thing to see. It's always we like this Giants front coming in, so it's nice to see them actually have some success.
And they finally started blitzing. Like Shane Bowen hadn't been blitzing,
right? Which I think
he was like his more philosophy. He's not a blitzer in the way it was
the rush fork.
That was why they got rid of Wink Martindale was that Dable didn't want an extra guy.
Right.
Compromising themselves in coverage, but the problem was just like the Giants couldn't get to they couldn't get it with their front guys at this point. Although we'll see, like maybe now they're getting hot. The other thing is Elijah Chapman, undrafted player, and you know why he's undrafted? It's because he's extremely undersized for a defensive tackle, but he's a hybrid DND tackle. He's only 6 foot. He's under 300 pounds, but he's like, Aaron Donald paved the way for so many different kinds of guys to be D tackles, right? Because he was undersized. That's why he fell to the Rams in the middle of the first round, despite his incredible athletic profile, smarts, work ethic, all that stuff. There should be more of these guys used more effectively. Like in the later of the draft, if they're undersized, they're not big, they're not traditional nose tackles, but he can pass rush as a ball of energy coming up the middle, and he complements those guys well as an undrafted rookie.
Yeah, I was gonna say to your point on that too is like. It's I think it's almost you can understand why the fundamentals would potentially make it so that a guy like him would be undrafted, but I think if that type of guy has some sort of suddenness, some sort of burst, some sort of hand fighting technique, as well as kind of the willingness, you can make something out of that. Because also, if you're potentially putting a guy like that against a little bit more of a slow-footed center or guard, that speed and kind of potentially the bend of being undersized in that regard makes you a bit of a different target for the center or the guard to try and actually get their hands on.
Yeah.
As opposed to sort of like a kind of like standard D tackle.
He has to be deployed in specific situations, right. But yeah.
And if a good enough DC, which I think Bowen is, I think Bowen will continue to see how he does. But yeah. I think for the most part, I like a guy with a Mike Vrabel type of sensibility for defense, but if he can kind of utilize him in the ways where he's the most successful, I don't think his profile is immediately a hindrance, and we're already seeing that. The other thing, but to your point about Nabers, is just like you're not gonna. I think there are some plays Marvin Harrison Jr. has already made where you're like, oh right, this is why he was drafted where he was drafted. I think the highlight reel though, I think the fireworks show of this class is still going to be Malik Nabers because
oh boy,
because the 2 touchdown catches were like the first one was like one of the better catches I've ever seen. Like
goosebumps.
It was like
You see that on camera?
Yeah, the hairs are sticking up.
A little bit. I have very light hair. Go on.
It didn't really matter where the ball was. Like he was in the right. He's one of those guys where like if he's in the vicinity of the ball, he has some sort of likelihood of catching it. It's not like I'm gonna get in the air and fight. It's like if it's 5 or 10 feet from me, like I'll figure out a way to try and corral it in.
I mean the toe tap falling down, like
That was unbelievable.
Unbelievable body control. Then the leaping in the air in the middle of the end zone was his 2 touchdowns were unbelievable. But the best play he made all game was on the sideline. Daniel Jones threw a 50-50 ball. It was an interception from, I think it was 23 on the Browns. I don't remember. He just grabbed it while falling out of bounds.
Like, to have the presence of mind and the strength and the hand-eye coordination to like reverse a pick, basically.
Yeah,
that's people who do that. Like that's what Odell Beckham Jr. used to do. That's what Justin Jefferson did in that play that against the. I actually don't remember who it would do. Do you remember who that was against? The one where he kind of one-handed.
Do I remember who that was against? It was against the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football.
Not OBJ. The Justin Jefferson. There was a similar catch I feel like, where he kind of
the Bills.
Yeah, I think that's what it was against the Bills, where he sort of just like wrenched the ball out of it. Like that. Those types of catches, like it's a rare group of people who are like he can battle in a one-on-one situation, and even if he potentially loses the rep in the middle of it, can reestablish himself and come back to win the rep. That's so impressive.
His physicality at the point of the catch is elite already, and he is young. He is so young. How old is he? I need to look it up now.
He's got to be, I think.
He's 21 years old. He just turned 21 in July. Yeah.
So he just turned 20. Like, it's not even like he'll be 22 in December. Like he literally
just turned 21. Yep. And he's already, you can make a case he's top 5, but I would say to be safe, he's already, I think, top 8. In veteran situations, it might be tough, but like I'd take him over Devontae Adams right now.
But also imagine him if there's a potential for a higher ceiling quarterback.
Hey,
imagine what he can do.
No, I know. And
look, even with it's crucial for Daniel Jones to have a guy like this.
Look, Daniel, the writing's on the wall. I hope Jones has success no matter where he goes, honestly, because he's never done anything wrong and like has been a consummate professional. But yeah, it's hard to imagine like what can this team be if they figure out their quarterback situation with him. I want them to give Dable another year, hopefully, as long as things go according to plan. Now, speaking of the other NFC East team in this, wait, did we shit on the Browns enough? I think I just shat on Deshaun Watson enough. I cook them. The vibes are horrible, and Deshaun Watson is now being faced with a lawsuit that's alleging forcible penetration.
Yeah, I think if I were the Browns, I would. It's a hard choice to make, but I do think I would potentially eat it and put Jameson.
I mean, they're putting Jameson for these short down situations where they do QB sneaks.
Like, might as well. Just pretend that you forgot to take him out.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, even
Deshaun Watson knows it.
DTR looks good.
Oh yeah, I mean, I just think
the 2 quarterbacks behind him may look better, better right now.
Literally try anything.
But who's
Jimmy Haslam?
Jimmy Haslam has the final say.
The payday lender aficionado.
Hey, he's a real piece of shit. He goes under the radar, but he's up there with definitely top 5 horrible owner in the NFL.
And I wonder if he sympathizes with this fellow piece of shit behind center. So it's just like, listen.
Like, at least Jerry Jones entertains us, but
there's nothing entertaining about Jimmy Haslam.
No. Him and Stephen Ross are real scumbags.
Yeah, and they sort of in a number of ways kind of represent the worst of their cities.
Totally. And I mean, God, none of these guys are good. Stan Kroenke's a piece of shit too.
Yeah,
what he did to St. Louis.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Michael Bidwell is friends with Brett Kavanaugh in Arizona.
Yeah, also
Shad Khan's a Trump supporter in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I mean Jerry Jones also a Trump supporter.
Yeah.
John Marish is kind of an idiot, but maybe one of the less problematic ones.
Yeah.
Robert Kraft's a huge Zionist.
Yep. Arthur Blank, the Home Depot guy or FedEx guy, can't remember which.
I guess Jeffrey Lurie is not the worst, right? If we're thinking
for the Eagles.
Yeah. What's his background?
No, I'm actually not entirely sure what his background is.
I don't know why we're doing this on the fly, but you know what I mean.
Someone mentioned the McCaskies for the Bears. Horrible.
Horrible.
Like these fossils clinging to the last strain of power. These 99-year-old robber barons in Chicago.
And I don't really know I don't know how Steve Bisciotti made his fortune to own the Ravens, but at least he lets his football guys do what they want.
I think that's probably the best you can ask for. It's just they're not meddlesome. And then of course David Tepper.
Oh yes, he's number one. He's number one piece of shit. And he'll pretend he didn't want to trade for Deshaun Watson, but he was literally in the thick of all of that.
But he would have picked up the phone.
Oh, my God. They were begging him. The only reason he went to Cleveland was they gave him a fully guaranteed contract, unprecedented. That's part of why he also hates it there. He doesn't want to live there. But you gave him a bunch of money, and he's facing all these lawsuits. How do you think that was going to work out for you?
Yeah.
Idiots. Okay, so the Cowboys are who I thought they were, okay? Look, they are still... I don't know how Thursday Night Football is going to go. I'm sure they're going to come into New York and smack the Giants. But they have the exact issues we were saying. Their run game sucks. By the way, Rico Dowdle is better than Zeke at this point. Zeke has more juice than I thought he would. But the Ravens avoid going to 0-3. They almost choked this one away, though, because they seem to just stop playing at a certain point and go into a shell. I don't know what to think of that, but they finally got Derrick Henry going. Hall of Famer, Derrick Henry, the best running back of this class. I mean, you got Adrian Peterson, his retire. You got to put Derrick Henry as the next guy, right? Who, in an era where this position is particularly being devalued, he just finds ways to be consistently, even if he's lost a little bit of speed, the just that dog, that guy. He also can run guys over, and he wears defenses down as the game goes on.
And I think that's also what's impressive about him, and sort of kind of his sort of place in the hierarchy of running backs for the past decade or so, is that to have the combination of size and speed that Henry has, he's sort of and he's sort of he's kind of in his own category in that regard. There aren't that many running backs who look like Derrick Henry to be that tall, strong, and fast. And also, what was kind of amazing in Tennessee is a lot of the time he was sort of he was almost a bit more of a zone back who would kind of go around the tackles and stuff like that and shoot off for big gains. What I like what sometimes the Ravens are using him is this man is built like an ox. He let him run through these tackles. No one's gonna. People are going. The entire defensive line is gonna have to try and bring this guy down.
Yeah,
and that's what was going on. Is that they were this talk about what we were saying with the Cowboys' run defense being ineffective. These guys were not going to have a great answer to Derrick Henry on the ground. I'll tell you what.
I know, and if the Ravens just kept pouring it on, it would have been a blowout because it was 21-6 at halftime, and that was only for Brandon Aubrey being the best kicker in the NFL right now.
He is unreal.
Look, I mean, tip for people who are drafting kickers or streaming them in fantasy: pick guys in domes. Okay, this is kind of the cheat code. It's a cheat code for a lot of fantasy, honestly. But if you're a player in a dome, and it required, or you play a lot in domes, it helps things out.
They trust him a lot, seemingly.
He kicked it over a 65-yard field goal. Right. He is second longest in the history of the NFL.
Yeah, he's just comfortably going out there and being like, oh, I may break a record this time. All right, no problem.
Yeah, and so it ended up just being way closer than it appeared, but the Ravens clamped it down. A clutch Lamar throw, and then they clutch Lamar run. They still have massive problems. I don't like this Todd Monken offense. They abandoned the run way too quickly. They did not get the ball to Mark Andrews one time yesterday,
which is becoming more and more puzzling as the weeks go on. That
he did not. I didn't watch him that closely because I was doing other things at this point. I need to go back and see what his snaps look like, but he did not look like the same guy in that week 1 game against the Chiefs.
Yes, right.
And that's when likely went the F off.
Yes, when he had that incredible game. Yeah.
He had a better game volume-wise game too, but I just feel I wonder he had a serious injury, Mark Andrews, and so Zay Flowers didn't really get going. It was just the run game. They couldn't. But why not? Do more of this, Ravens. That's the thing. You don't need to be the Chiefs. Do your own thing.
The only seemingly, I think, mostly successful passing outcome was the Rashad Bateman touchdown, and that's a pretty rare occurrence for the most part, which is unfortunate because I think Bateman is a useful wide receiver. It's just as you're saying, there's not a ton of this stuff that's actually kind of schemed up for their pass catchers. That's really that really I think plays to their strengths. You know what I mean? I think there's a way where there can be more optimization for Zay Flowers, for Rashad Bateman, for even Nelson Aguilar, and it just doesn't really, outside of kind of targets to likely, it just does not seem to be something that they're even really looking at that closely.
Yeah.
And And of course, like having the 1-2 punch of the rushing attack being Lamar and Henry is great, but I just think you want your offense to be more multiple than that, especially when you have the type of aspirations that the Ravens have in the AFC.
100%. All right, let's do these other, I guess. Oh, the other thing I wanted to point out is what the hell is going on with the San Francisco 49ers?
I mean, also,
no business losing that game.
The Rams were playing guys off the street.
Oh, my God.
I can't believe it. I really can't believe it.
Look, George Kittle was a late exit from, like, the team. Late exit from the team.
He's a late scratch, right?
Late scratch. I didn't realize that he was that banged up, whatever.
No, me neither, yeah.
But yeah, so it was really the Juwan Jennings show and then they ended up and the Jake Moody show.
Which by the way, Emma, I don't know if you'll recall from Thursday, we were sort of saying it would be the Juwan Jennings show.
I picked him up and I left him on my bench, but yeah.
I mean, he was going off yesterday.
He was, and I just don't know what's going on with the 49ers. I think that they're old, they're beat up. Their defense is stale. Like, I just don't know what to make of them.
I think it'll be interesting because I do think a number of these injuries so far, however advanced they are, is just going to be so critical to their path in the sense of how long we'll be without Christian McCaffrey. If anything with George Kittle or Debo is severely long term, if Trent Williams actually has something that's going to be continually bothering him. The other issue, which might be training camp, might be vibes, I don't really know exactly how to say it. Brandon Ayuk has not looked like himself.
No.
He is consistently he's gotten targets from Purdy, but he has had a number of drops. I feel like almost a number of sort of like late keys on his routes. Like he has not looked like the consistent safety blanket guy that he was for Brock Purdy last season.
Yeah, he's still, I mean, there's issues with the conditioning, but that wasn't that big of an issue for CeeDee Lamb. I just don't think that Brandon Ayuk is the talent that his contract demands implied. I mean, it seems like that it was reflected in the guarantees or lack thereof, but
and you know,
it's good in the system.
But it's showing a little bit that maybe without some of the cushion, or at least not maybe cushion, just sort of the
bells and whistles.
Yeah, and also I just think that the other components of the ecosystem that make everything a little bit easier, like having Debo as the other sort of option, or kind of like knowing that something is going to be set up specifically for Christian McCaffrey, like it kind of, I think just having those guys, or even having Trent Williams out there at full strength, I just think all of those components make everything easy for everybody else. So to have none of that, it sort of puts a much larger spotlight on Ayuk, and so far he has not really been performing to that level. And you could also see it in the frustration on the sideline right when the game ended. He was like getting into it with guys on the Rams sideline. He almost, I feel like was chirping Sean McVay. Like, I feel like it was not a great It was not a great performance and great scene for Ayuk yesterday.
It was not.
And but real strong credit to the Rams. I mean, what the hell? And
Stafford.
I mean, I could not believe they won this game. I just like they are starting like 3 or 4 backup linemen. There's no Puka Nacua. There's no Cooper Kupp. They're missing, as we were talking about, Emma, on Thursday. They're missing John Johnson, their safety. They're missing 2 or 3 other guys on defense. Like, this is a skeleton crew that they're playing with.
And the fact that Kyren Williams was still as productive as he is, I mean, he wasn't efficient, but he had 2 touchdowns.
Right.
With that offensive line. Credit to both Kyren Williams and Matthew Stafford,
totally.
And of course Sean McVay for pulling this out. The 49ers have problems. That was a crazy game for them to lose in that manner.
And it just goes to show you that, honestly, I think another thing that's kind of always, regardless of personnel, what's kind of crazy about these matchups is that these 2 coaches just know each other so well.
I mean, back from their days in Washington.
Right. Like
they're old friends.
Right. I think they know each other's dispositions. They know each other's sensibilities. They know each other's kind of like predispositions towards certain elements of the offense. Like, they're constantly, I feel like, monitoring one another, and I think it's almost frustrating that I feel like there must be some unique frustration when one of those guys loses to the other guy.
Yeah, exactly. And And by the way, a good middle finger from the Rams players to all those 49ers fans in the stands because they took over the stadium down there in Los Angeles.
Right. There's not really a home field advantage to SoFi very much. So,
not much at all. Better than the Chargers, but not much at all.
Yeah, right, exactly. But in the two occupants of the stadium.
The Lions had a clutch game. They had that phenomenal play where the ladder play from Amon-Ra to Jahmyr Gibbs, which resulted in the touchdown.
Oh, that was awesome. That was so cool.
The Detroit defense, for me, has been the strength of the team so far. They haven't been able to fully get their offense firing on all cylinders. Like, this was finally the Amon-Ra St. Brown game. He had 75 yards receiving. He had a touchdown as well. So, like, the offense is churning along a little bit, but they need to get the run going mostly for all that other stuff to work. And they still haven't fully incorporated Jameson Williams with all of his talent into the game. But the defense showed up. They shut down Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray had an interception. They were able to stifle that offense. Marvin Harrison Jr. still did have a really pretty touchdown. But it was the Cardinals, I think, are going to hang around and be difficult for a lot of teams. It's just like, can they make it out of the NFC? I don't know. I had picked them to be close, but with the Rams still hanging around, maybe they can get healthy. The Seahawks having a big lead in that division, and then the 49ers being older, but as talented as they are, this is hopefully just a building year for Arizona. But like, Kyler looks awesome. I mean, he didn't have his best game this game, but he looks the part.
But that's, I think, what's to your point about kind of the building year. Like, I think I may have said this on a few weeks ago, that I feel like a nice outcome for the Cardinals is if, speaking of their opponent this past on Sunday, is if they could be like the Lions from like 2 seasons ago.
Yes.
Where even though they're probably not making the playoffs, even if they're kind of like in it towards the end, like in the hunt sort of, even if they play spoiler like the Lions did to the Packers that year.
Yeah.
Like something like that, I think would be a huge win because of how much they're still building that roster, just maybe seeing that they're going to get extra steps from young guys on this team, to see if even the defense can kind of just like get more reps, become more of a solid unit, as opposed to kind of a disparate, number of spare parts sort of trying to work together. I think that's kind of the primary, ideal outlook. And also, that, to your point, is you're saying this is what we're talking about when we talk about a guy, about not always comparing like smaller quarterbacks to Kyler Murray, because it's a different story, because Kyler has different tools.
Because Kyler's a phenomenal talent.
Because Kyler's a serious athlete. Kyler's like a legit athlete.
And a legit thrower
and
of the football.
And has a legit arm.
So
even though this, obviously they were held, and credit to the Lions defense for holding them to 10 points. I still think there's a lot more to glean and to kind of draw from this Drew Petzing offense.
What could you be talking about as it relates to smaller quarterbacks? Could it be the fact that the Panthers put up 36 points on the Raiders?
I watched the first drive in absolute disbelief. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. So in this offense now that I've been watching for the past 2 weeks, Andy Dalton is now Dan Marino?
Basically. That team needed that. Look, the reports are trickling out that it appeared like Andy Dalton was the better quarterback in training camp the entire time. And it was a matter of time before the team just turned on their head coach and been like, what the hell? Like, specifically the wide receivers, the running, like the personnel on offense. I mean, the defense was getting screwed too. But like Andy Dalton.
Hey, Dan Marino on the brain.
Andy Dolphin is funny.
I love Andy Dolphin.
Me too. Me too. Andy Dalton was awesome. And, the Raiders, I don't know what. And by the way, like, he spread the ball around. It was Deontay Johnson.
Yeah.
And Adam Thielen, who got a little banged up with his hamstring on his touchdown
but
catch.
held on to that ball.
That ball. And the offensive line, like, Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins, I guess they were a little banged up, but I didn't really notice them that much.
No, but this is, I think.
Oh, and Chuba Hubbard.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and also even the run game was getting going more than it was prior with Chuba Hubbard, and I think what's really crucial to your point about the offensive line is that this was the first game where I was like, oh, I think I was maybe I think I was maybe conflating Bryce Young's poor play with the offensive line's poor play,
but that's what football is. It's so hard to discern, right?
It's hard to kind of like disentangle who's kind of at fault. But seeing how they were playing with Dalton, I mean, there are a few reps where you saw Robert Hunt and Ike Ekwonu kind of sliding, climbing to the second level, like absolutely annihilating linebackers in their way.
Yeah.
And you weren't really seeing that, or even it wasn't something to highlight because all of the focus were on the lapses that were coming from the Bryce Young-led offense. I mean, it's pretty stark to see what we saw weeks 1 and 2, than to have a 14-year veteran come in and not only look serviceable, but look legitimately good against a defense that has some legitimate pieces on it, that has Max Crosby, has Christian Wilkins, has like actual players in the spine of the defense. Like, it was remarkable that if Andy Dalton came out there and threw for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, I'd be like, okay, cool. Like, they can remain afloat.
Yeah.
This was in a better and almost like in an exponential way relative to what we were seeing with Bryce Young. And it's unfortunate to say that, it makes very clear that he is and was the problem.
That's the eye test said it. Everything said it. The team.
And it makes me sad because I don't think he seems like a good guy.
Oh,
like,
totally.
He seems like someone who wants to win. He literally said to reporters, "It's been clear that every time the ball has been snapped to me, I haven't been doing what I'm supposed to be doing with it." Like, he's internalizing this. Like, I feel for the guy.
Me too.
But I do give credit to Dave Canales to not thinking, "Hey, I'm a first-year head coach. I need to ride with the first overall pick."
They were going to lose the locker room, and
and probably maybe lose 6 games in a row, maybe more.
But by the way, he's not making that decision without David Tepper signing off. So
no, I think to be fair, and not to give David Tepper any credit, I more mean like it's probably for the best that none of them were basically like, we need to ride this till the wheels fall off, as opposed to saying, just put Andy in and see if we can literally get baseline play from somebody.
It's the one time that David Tepper's impatience has led him in the correct direction.
the picture of the worst person just made a great point.
Exactly. Lastly, I gotta jump in this just in a sec, but we have to talk about Chiefs Falcons really briefly.
They can't keep getting away with this.
Kirk's limiting this offense a little. He doesn't have enough power on his throws right now. And it's hard because I can see him trying, but you can see it in his body language on the sideline. He knows he's not playing the way that he's used to being to playing.
And I think it might be. I think I obviously not a doctor, not a body language specialist. It seems like it's slightly trying. Like, it seems like he's not. The mobility is very clearly a problem.
Yes, it's a problem. He's having a problem getting enough more power. He's been throwing like it low a little. The receivers have had to go to the ground. He's been getting better as the game has gone along. Like, he threw some nice balls to Drake London, who is a possession receiver who can go up and get it. The other thing is that this game the refs were way too involved.
Yeah,
it was annoying.
Yeah,
Enough. It was a horribly officiated game from start to finish. It was a difficult watch. I mean, Justin Simmons picked off Patrick Mahomes. We're like, hey, we have a game. The Chiefs are doing, what they did last year, where they're still not necessarily putting teams away. Like, Xavier Worthy just stopped running his route. He sat in the zone as opposed to continuing to go down. And that was why Mahomes just missed him. And then the Falcons had an opportunity to come back, and they couldn't. And so that is how that ended up. I mean, look, the Falcons, they're in trouble of getting, left behind right now, even though I think Raheem Morris is doing overall a good job. But because the offense with all of those players is not performing in the way that it needs to be, they can get left behind in a division that has the Saints that are playing really well and the Bucs that are playing really well.
And it's tough because what's interesting and what I wasn't expecting is I honestly think in some capacities, not anywhere on the offense, but the secondary is actually one of the stronger units on this team.
Well, those two safeties were playing their ass off.
Like, Jesse Bates has been looking incredible as he did last year. AJ Terrell has kind of, I think, had a bounce back year. Clark Phillips, who's a rookie safety, he's also been playing really well. or he's a second year. He's a young guy. I think they've honestly they've given him some responsibility, and he's taking to it well. I think we're just seeing some of the. I think if there was some elevation of the quarterback play, the warts wouldn't be so clear. But because we're seeing a little bit of that, we're seeing some of the real strain from Kirk, that the warts are kind of like. And what I mean by that is like, the Pitts touchdown gets called back, or because of, I think it got called back because of a flag.
Some flag.
There and that's like, the offensive line, where a lot of people do see this as a top end unit. They struggle sometimes with discipline. They're mainly almost every guy outside of Chris Lindstrom is a run blocking first guard or lineman.
Good point.
So they're not as meant for a fortified pass blocking unit. And even if there's still some discipline and sloppiness going on, I mean, it is tough to withstand that when like neither the pass or the run are looking overwhelmingly effective. Yep. So even if something was kind of ebbing, but something else was coming across really prominently, we're not seeing that. We're kind of seeing an averaging out of both attacks. And so, I mean, we'll see what happens, but I don't know how.
We'll see.
I'm a little concerned that for another season or another like stretch of time where these players are potentially squandered.
I think they're a little banged up on the offensive line, but they have 2 division games next, and so maybe we'll see a little bit more now that they play the Saints and the Bucs. And I forget in which order, but that'll a good test of what that the Falcons team really is. But I got to jump. I got to run. So
I was just gonna say, if you think they sit Kirk or not at some point.
Oh. It depends. I don't really know.
Hard for me to say.
It's hard for me to say because there's a lot of financial interest in them not doing so. Okay, really quick. What's your score for tonight for Bills, Jags, and for Commanders, Bengals?
I have very little trust in the Jags, so I'm probably going to say something like 28-14 for Bills.
I don't think that they're going to. I think they're going to give it their all so I think that the Bills will win, but I'm going to go 28-24.
Okay, it's a little closer. And then Bengals, similar thing. I think Burrow's going to want to slice and dice these guys. It could be like 30-6 Bengals.
I don't think 6. I think that the Commanders will score. I'm going to say 30-14.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'd be nice. It would be nice for Dan to get 2 touchdowns.
Yes. Yeah, I that's what I'm thinking. All right, folks. Sorry, guys. I know people I am, but I have somewhere to be. So I will see you on Thursday for our picks, because now Bradley and I are all tied up.
I'm so back. I'm so back
this weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.